Hi, I'm Khushboo Razdan, and this is Foreign Correspondents Talk Series 2024, an initiative by the Association of Foreign Press Correspondents USA, where we invite members of the foreign press community to talk about their work story and experiences. And today, I'm delighted to have with me my first woman journalist guest on the program, 2024 series, Romina. I'm so sorry, Romina from Belgium. Romina, how do I take your name? Give me your full name. I'm so sorry.
Well, good morning. My full name is Romina Van Camp, but my first name, you got it correct.
Romina. So, Romina, you're from Belgium. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so tell me, why did you want to be a journalist? We are up so early in the morning, and that's our daily life. It's nothing. We sleep late. We are always on the ground. We're always chasing people, not in the best of conditions. There are times when you go and get food. You don't have, we are women, and it's different for us. It's different for men to be on ground. It's different for us to be on ground. There, sometimes you're not in best of your physically you're not in your best, mentally sometimes you're not in your best, but we still go out and we do our best. How has what gravitated you towards this profession, and why did you want to be a journalist?
Well, in the beginning, I was not sure if I wanted to be a journalist, so I studied journalism when I was a student. And after I graduated with my bachelor's degree in journalism, I still didn't want to go to work, so I did another bachelor program, international communication.
Mhm.
And in that program, you have to do an internship in another language than your mother tongue. So I wanted to go to the United States. And because of my journalistic degree, I wanted to do an internship in an American newsroom. And so I applied with several major networks for an internship, and I got an internship at CBS News in New York.
Mhm.
So I lived in New York for almost 6 months. I did an internship. And it's actually there during that internship where I got to do a lot of things, a variety of stories. I got to go along with reporters, went to red carpet movie premieres. I went to the Wall Street Stock Exchange. I did human interest stories. And it's actually there that I kind of felt, okay, this is what I want to do. And then after my intern visa expired, I went back to Belgium, and then I applied with the two major networks in Belgium, and then I got a job at VTM right away, and I'm there ever since for now 15 years. But because of my US connection and also my godmother, she's American, um, I always had the ambition and the dream, even when I was younger, to become a US correspondent. So I made that clear to my bosses that I want to be a foreign correspondent in the first place. So I covered numerous stories abroad for my network. I covered the European refugee crisis in 2015. I will never forget that. I crossed, from the islands of Greece where the migrants arrived through all over Europe, all the way to Berlin. I was the UK correspondent. I was not based in London. Like, I was based in Brussels because you get there very quickly. But I covered Brexit. I covered numerous UK elections. A variety of UK prime ministers. They had a lot the past few years. Um, and I covered breaking news stories all over the world. And in 2014, I covered my first US midterm election. And ever since 2014, I covered every presidential and every midterm election. And when I got back from the presidential elections in 2020, I basically told my boss, okay, let's discuss the future because I'd like to move there and become a US correspondent. And then I moved here.
So, going back to your New York experience, you said you were in New York, you covered different beats, and then you moved to Belgium. How was that different? The time in the type of stories that you did, the type of experience that you had as a journalist. New York is a crazy city. I lived there for 3 years, and it kind of made I just went kind of bonkers because it's like a confluence of everything, good and the bad, the ugly and the beautiful. And then you went to Belgium. How was that different, when you went to Belgium and started doing journalism in Europe?
Well, obviously, when you move back from abroad, back to your home country, you start feeling a bit homesick for the country that you left, which is weird because you moved from your home country to a foreign country. And that's very exciting because you meet a lot of new people, you're in a new environment. So you get a lot of extra new vibes, and there's so much new things to learn and to discover, which is exciting and interesting. So by the time you move back from another country back to your home country, you start feeling homesick for your, the country where you, for your foreign country. So that's kind of like the weird mindset. You mean it's playing with your mind at that moment. So obviously, after I moved back from New York to Belgium, I was like, okay, what am I going to do here? I lived in New York, but then yeah, you got a job offer at one of the major networks in Belgium, and you can't say no to that. Obviously, I was still a student. I mean, I was an intern, so I had to still learn the profession. Um, yeah, I got to learn it at VTM in the first year and a half. I started in the online newsroom, writing articles for the website, and then I quickly moved on to the general newsroom, first doing some stories for the general news, but I had a specific interest in foreign news reporting, and then I moved to the foreign news desk. So yeah, but when you live here in America, especially now here in Washington D.C., you feel how small the world sometimes is in Belgium, or the view or the mindset of the people there,
Mhm.
and that's sometimes really, yeah, I need to realize that I'm making stories for people in Belgium, and that I have to keep in mind what their focus and what their interests are. And sometimes, when it gets too inside domestic political here in the US, when it comes to Congress, they're not very interested in that. So you kind of have to know what's in it for me, for the Belgian people, in this story.
Mhm. You said that you have been here for so many years now, and you started your journalism career. How do you think that people in Belgium, you said that they're not very interested in the domestic of it, but U.S. politics could be very very entertaining at times. What are the kind of stories that you're covering from here? Is it just U.S. Belgium relationship, or is it more to that?
No, it's not just US Belgium relationship. I think that's too narrow, but there's a high interest in stories about Donald Trump. Who are his voters? Why do people still support him after so many years? So I try to go to the real, the people behind the Trump voters, not just go to his rallies, not just cover, the Trump speeches, but also try to find where these voters live, in which areas of the country do they live. So I went to Colorado for Super Tuesday, but I didn't stay in Boulder or Denver. I really went to the rural areas, the Great Plains, where you can drive hours and hours without seeing any house. Um, and that's where I met the Trump voters. And then when you talk to them, you try to, um, sometimes people in Belgium don't really get why people vote for Donald Trump. So I'll try to tell the story through the eyes of the Trump voters. You might not agree with them, but at least you have some kind of understanding why, because of their situation, are they voting for this specific presidential candidate.
Mm-hmm. The elections are coming in US in November. How's the vibe in Belgium? Back in Belgium, what are people thinking, anticipating about the election? Kind of like in whole of Europe and the allied, US allied world, there's people are kind of like cross-fingered about Donald Trump coming back. How's the situation in Belgium regarding these elections?
Well, I think that not just in Belgium, but all over Europe, people
Mm-hmm.
are worried. I mean, especially the EU with the war in Ukraine going on, and maybe a reduced support of the US for NATO when Donald Trump becomes president again. That's a serious concern in Europe and in Belgium, especially because Belgium is, we're not very good in contributing to NATO. We're one of the worst students of the class, to say it like that. So we don't contribute enough. And when you have a presidential candidate like Donald Trump saying like, hey, Putin can do whatever he wants with the countries that are not contributing enough for NATO defense, that's worrisome to us. And then, we have to prepare. Europe cannot longer be depending on the United States always, like it has done that in the past. US has shown under Donald Trump that it's not always the reliable ally or partner that it was in the past. And Europe realizes that after the first Trump presidency, and they're like bracing for that for a possible second Donald Trump term. So obviously, there's a high interest in everything what Donald Trump says and does. And sometimes we kind of need to, I kind of like want to be like the guard, and kind of like make sure that we don't go over the top in that. especially because there's also a high focus on, Biden's gaffes or when he stumbles or because of his age. And I'm like, okay, but Donald Trump also mixes up a lot of names. So you kind of have to find a balance here. You cannot focus too much on Joe Biden, who misspeaks himself, and not on Donald Trump, who does actually basically the same thing. So I try to make sure that I make my editors aware of that they don't have, that they don't look at the stories like this, but kind of like make sure you get the broader perspective, and that is both ways.
Mm-hmm. I would want to ask you, what is the difference between your newsrooms in Belgium and the newsrooms that you worked in the US? Because I ask people when I interview someone from, say, India or Pakistan or the countries that are not really high on freedom of press, but Belgium is one country which always, Denmark, Belgium, these are countries that always rate really high when it comes to freedom of speech and expression. So how are these newsrooms different? And what has your experience? How has your experience been different with these two different types of newsrooms?
Well, I think budget wise, we're a much smaller newsroom than American newsrooms when you're abroad. I mean, not just here in the United States, but when I was abroad in other countries covering stories, and then you see American news crews arrive, they come with an entire army. So they have like a crew of producers, camera operators, they have their own makeup crew, they have a variety of, journalists. So they set up an entire outdoor studio, and we are just, it's just me and my cameraman. It's just the two of us. And part of the deal when I was about to become a U.S. correspondent, it was like, okay, we don't have the budget to hire a full-time camera crew for you or to move a camera crew with you to the United States. So you have to do everything on your own. So I was used to working with a crew, which I developed, a deep friendship with over the years, because you get along, you have to travel a lot and spend, nights together in hotel rooms, have breakfast, lunch, and dinner 3 times a day if you get the chance to eat. So you develop, a deep friendship. But now I have to do everything on my own. So I do my own camera work, my own editing, research, everything, and that makes the job lonelier, especially when you see the other American crews and the other American newsrooms who have so many more resources and so many more people to work on a story. So that's the main difference, that we're just smaller. We're a smaller country. So that was for me the biggest challenge, like having to do everything on my own. It does get lonely sometimes.
You are your own newsroom, then you are everything. You are your own newsroom.
I'm my own newsroom. I do my own the research of all my stories. I set up the interviews. I sometimes even book my own flights because it's much more convenient for me to do it from here than my producer who does it from Belgium, because sometimes, I get better rates when I look it up here than she does. So yeah, it's like I'm a one woman crew. I do everything.
Wonderful. I want to ask you that, you're a White House correspondent here as well. You go to White House quite often. When was the first time you went there and how was that like? Because we're not from here. And when we go there, when I went there for the first time, I was shocked. I didn't expect it to be so huge. In fact, I forgot my glasses, so I couldn't see President Biden that very well. But and my mom was asking, how does he look? And I was like, actually, I couldn't see him properly. I forgot my glasses. When was your first time at the White House? And how has your experience been? There's so many White House press briefings every day, and you get to attend them. How is that like?
Well, I think I remember the very first time I was at the White House, but that was years ago when President Obama was still president, and there was a delegation of Belgium. It was during the terror attacks in Europe. There was a
Mhm.
delegation of Belgium visiting the White House, so I accompanied them. So that was my very first time entering the White House grounds, and where you have, Pebble Beach, like the green tents where all the U.S. crews set up. Um, so that was my very first time, and that was very impressive because I was like, wow, I'm standing on holy ground here or something like that. That's how it felt to me as a journalist. Um, but being there, able to attend the briefings and just walking around there basically every day, it's a privilege. You're in the political capital of the world. You're in the center of where decisions are made that have a huge impact on the rest of the world as well. So I think it's an absolute privilege. It's an honor. And also, we do not get to ask a lot of questions in the briefing room as foreign journalists. It's kind of hard to get a question through. So there's just sometimes like sometimes we have the feeling that the White House press corps, or that they're, or not the White House press corps, but I mean the White House press office, is just not very interested in the foreign media, or just doesn't give us the same time to ask questions, or than the U.S. correspondents, than the home based American journalists. So that's kind of sometimes a struggle. It's to get that access, to get the information, especially when you're on the campaign trail and covering, Donald Trump's campaign or Joe Biden's campaign. You don't always get the media advisories from the campaign team, so it's harder to get access. You have to work harder for it. And also because foreign correspondents, they tend to rotate every 3 to 4 years. So I get it why they are like, well, you're not here for too long, so why would we invest in you? But I mean, you also want to cover the stories from from the first, like all the other journalists do. So it's tough, especially when you are not allowed at Donald Trump campaign rallies because you're a foreign reporter. And that's kind of weird because he did let us attend in 2016 and 2020. I remembered I covered numerous rallies of Donald Trump back then. So it's weird why they cut out foreign media now. And same for the Biden campaign. I mean, I spoke to some other foreign correspondents, and we've stopped receiving media advisories for his campaign events. So it's kind of like, what's going on? So that's tough. It's much more difficult.
Good for you to speak about that, because this is the problem that I also face on
Mm.
regular basis. It's so hard for me to get that information or get access to people because I'm a foreign journalist. But leaving that aside, I cannot let you go before asking about your experience as a woman journalist covering the refugee crisis. How was that like? And uh, you know, uh, you said you traveled throughout. Uh, I was so far away. A lot of people were so far away, just watching that whole thing panning out on television. Like, journalists like you were giving us information. We had no idea, sitting thousands of miles away. How was that experience? And is there anything that the television media really missed, or something that people did not notice about that crisis?
You mean the crisis in 2015? Okay. Um, well, I think we kind of followed the path of the refugees and the migrants. So we started off on the island of Kos, if I'm correct, in Greece. So we saw them with their boats coming, arriving on the beach, and we kind of followed their trace through Europe. From Greece, we went to Macedonia, to Serbia, Austria, Germany. So we kind of followed every step that they took. I spent nights with them where they were sleeping on train tracks, waiting for the next train to come to take them to the next country. I spoke to volunteers. I spoke to the people who registered them as asylum seekers. So you kind of want to make sure, if you're tracking how they move through Europe, that you cover all angles, that you cover their personal stories, why they're leaving their home countries, where they want to go, but they also cover the other side, like how are they welcomed in these countries. Like in some countries where they were very hostile towards these migrants, we saw some violence at the border. Then we saw some more heartwarming welcoming in other countries. So it depends. I mean, I remember that I met this girl from Afghanistan. I think I met her in Greece. And then a few weeks later, I met her again by accident in Austria. And I was, I felt good for her that she made it so far. And that's heartwarming to see that the people you've met in the beginning, that you meet them at the end of their trail as well. So I think it was one of the most intense summers that I experienced as a reporter. But it's one of the stories that I will always remember. I was also um, nominated for press awards for those stories that I covered on the refugee crisis. But I had a crew with me back then, so that is different. If you have a male crew with you, if you have a colleague, I had a female crew with me as well, so we were a female crew. You kind of like, it makes it more, how do I say this, emotionally less charged because you can share it together. When you're tired, when you're impressed by what people you've met or the stories you've heard, you kind of get like you kind of get it out of your system by the end of the day. And that's great that you can share it with somebody who's there with you covering it. I don't know if you would cover it all alone. I think it's going to be much more of a challenge and tougher. I'm also very aware that I'm a woman when I, do stories here in the United States. I haven't had any bad experience yet, but I have had thoughts like, okay, I have to be careful where I am right now because I don't have any cell phone service here. Because I want to do the stories like in the outback and where not the most. No, I don't want to do stories that everyone else does. I want to try to find those Trump voters. Where do they live? And then sometimes you are just alone with men that have different views or and you kind of have to be aware of the fact that you're there alone and make sure that, you know, I mean, I haven't had any bad experience yet, but I noticed myself that I'm much more aware and much more alert of the environment and the situation where I'm in at that moment because I'm a woman alone.
Yeah, that happens, and that we have to be like that. Otherwise, one mistake and you are, you're regretting it, and you don't want that when you're focused on your work. You want to get the work done and get out. Kind of
Yes,
that
exactly.
yeah, that's the kind of situation. Before I promise this is my last question. This is so interesting to inspiring as well to talk to you. Uh, Going back to the elections, how is Belgium or the EU preparing for a second Trump, uh, term in the White House? And how, because I cover China, and I cannot let you go before I ask you about the China dynamic of this whole thing. How is Belgium, Europe dealing with China right now, and how does that change if Donald Trump comes back to the White House?
Well, we have our own elections in Belgium this year. We have elections in June, and we have elections in October. So we're gonna face our own political crisis in Belgium. That's gonna keep us occupied a lot. We expect long government negotiations because we are used to have a coalition government. So we have a lot of different political parties in Belgium. Also, because of the complex situation of my country, you have the northern part where we speak Dutch and the southern part where we speak French, and you have separate governments in each part of the country, and then you have the federal government. So it's going to be it's going to be it's going to be tough in Belgium this year to set up a government, especially because the four right parties are doing very well in the polls. But we have elections all over in the world this year. It's going to be busy for us journalists. So bracing for a Trump presidency, um, I think Belgium is aware that we need to contribute more to NATO, and they've made efforts for the next upcoming years to do so. Will it be enough to suit Donald Trump when he becomes president? We don't know. I don't think anyone can really. How do I say this? It's Donald Trump. You never know what he's going to say, what he wants, what he's going to do. I mean, it's the unexpected that you have with him as a president. But I think we have a very good impression of what it's going to be like because we have had him before as president of the United States. So I think Europe has to remain, this very tight alliance, although there are many differences between the different EU member states as well. And that's what Russia wants. That split up the European Union, divide the countries. And Joe Biden has done an excellent job in trying to keep the alliance together so far. And if Donald Trump becomes president again, I think it will have, a certain impact on the strength of the European alliance, most
Do
definitely.
people really care back in Europe about the foreign policy? Because in several countries, people are more interested about that, like you said, their domestic problems. But do people really care about what China is doing with the US, the competition, or has the war in Ukraine really changed their perception about foreign affairs? And they're like, oh, we should be more, we should worry more about foreign affairs and what's happening on our borders and how we're dealing with different countries.
Well, most definitely. I mean, if you have the French President Macron saying that, that he would not exclude sending ground troops to Ukraine, if you have Germany saying that they might expect a Russia attack on NATO, that is worrisome, especially because, we have a lot of Ukraine refugees in Belgium. You see Ukrainian cars driving around in my country with Ukraine license plates. So it gets really close to us because we have a war going on in our backyard. And then when you see all these threats or, other countries worrying or, especially with Sweden becoming a NATO member state, they're trying to set up their defense. I think we are in worrisome times. So yes, people are much more aware of foreign policy, especially because it also impacts their energy bill. I mean, we have seen energy prices rise over the past years because of the war in Ukraine. So it affects people right in their wallet. People had difficulties paying their energy bills. So yes, obviously that plays in the mind of people. Absolutely.
So is this an election issue as well? When people go out to vote, do they care about this as an election issue? Or
I don't think that I mean, also here in the United States, foreign policy is not always top of mind of voters. I mean, it's the economy, it's how they feel about the state of their country, how they feel about their own welfare state at that moment. So I don't think that will be a decisive topic in voters' mind in Belgium in how they will vote for a new Belgian government. I don't think so. I think they will mostly look at their own, like, how am I doing right now? Am I better off than I was before or not? I think that's what most voters um, think and how they will, decide how they will vote. Um, so yeah, we'll have to see.
Uh, Romina, thank you so much for your time. It was lovely speaking to you. And I will see you around. We're in the same city. I cannot, wait to sit down and talk to you in person. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks a lot for sharing your stories. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Have a nice day.
Bye bye.
Bye.